Howdy, howdy. How's everybody doing this evening? It's a Monday night. Happy Memorial Day to everybody and remembrance to all things lost to us there and all that. We definitely are out there with you, but we're here tonight. We're ready to talk some football. We're ready to talk some Cardinals football because we were actually going to be going to the Raiders this evening. But after what the Cardinals have done last week, we felt like it was time to probably go over something and some of the fantasy value that may still kind of remain on the bones there in Arizona. On my left, I got my man Drop the Leash, Joe. What's happening, man? How we doing this evening?
So you said it right, my friend. Happy Memorial Day, and to everybody who has served, we appreciate you. And to the Arizona Cardinals and their 2023-2024 fantasy value, we do not appreciate you.
Yes, we do not appreciate that. Yes, we're having a separate Memorial Day for you next fall. And down there, wearing the shirt like a man down there, we got my man Jeff. Jeff, how we doing? 2 ticks to fantasy. How's it going, brother?
Doing well, brother. Hey, I'll echo the Memorial Day sentiments like you, gentlemen. And yeah, we probably should have stuck with the Raiders, but because the Hopkins thing, we did transition to the Cardinals, which should probably be a pretty short discussion, I would think, Mike. But we'll go from here.
One of the nice things about picking the Cardinals is, we probably won't be here very long this evening because there really isn't a whole awful lot to talk about. We always kind of do a little bit of pre-show warm-up and stuff like that, and we go over it, and I was talking about it, and I'm like, the one thing I noticed, because, the thing I like to go over is the draft picks that these guys go for, and the Cardinals, I don't think were really thinking ahead when they dropped DeAndre Hopkins because they didn't really draft any receivers. Now, of course, you're not going to go out there and you're not going to draft the DeAndre Hopkins, right? Like, it's just not a guy that you get. And if I remember correctly, he was a third-round guy anyways, and he exploded in the NFL. So, I mean, it happens, but it's not like these guys went out and addressed the need for a wide receiver quite well because their depth chart right now is reading as Marquise Brown, Rondell Moore, and Greg Dortch is the top three receivers there. And then you got Zach Ertz there at the tight end, James Conner in the back. They did draft Michael Wilson out of Stanford, who's good. He's big. There's a few knocks on his speed and there's a few knocks on his hands. And he is a backup. He definitely isn't going to be carving a starting role right away. But Marquise Brown is a drop monster. Joe, why don't you fill us in on what they did as far as free agency goes?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, they did not address. I don't think I think that they really thought at some point that they were going to keep DeAndre Hopkins, and wherever that miscommunication went south for them was a surprise to them last week. Looking at this from a fantasy perspective, there's not a free agent signing to talk about other than Zach Pascal, who probably slots in right now as their fourth wideout, to your point, between Brown, Moore, and Dortch. And, it's funny, like if DeAndre Hopkins is your one, Brown, Moore, and Dortch actually makes a great foursome. Hollywood Brown, and even last year caught a lot of balls for them, can make a lot of big plays despite the fact that he is certainly inconsistent with his hands, but he had 107 targets, 67 catches, and he missed a few games too. So he was high volume for them last year. And Rondell Moore was a great compliment to Hopkins too, because Moore had some, he can stretch the field. They started using him kind of out of the backfield a little bit as one of those kind of like hybrid type players too. And he showed some flashes. And then even Dortch, he filled in admirably and had some high volume weeks too when Hopkins was out. The problem is when you don't have Hopkins there as your one and all those guys bump up, it's dreadful. Hollywood Brown has already proven that he cannot make an offense successful as the number one wide out there. He was playing with Lamar as the number one in Baltimore for multiple years, and it never really amounted to much. Again, Rondell Moore, I love as a 3, but as a 2, I don't think he's ready yet. And then Dortch and Pascal, Pascal's good in the red zone. But other than that, it's an underwhelming group for a guy like Kyler Murray, who even Kyler Murray right now, I don't think anybody's sold on him on a regular, from an NFL winning perspective or a fantasy perspective. Zach Ertz, tight end, that's great, but can he stay healthy? So you're really from a fantasy, and then James Conner, running back, as you said, Keontae Ingram, Corey Clement is the 2 and 3. Fantasy wise, in all honesty, Marquise Brown maybe is your 3 to start the season. I guess 2 is a stretch. Rondale Moore at the back of your bench. James Conner maybe is your 3 to start the season. I guess maybe Conner could pass as an RB2 if he's healthy week 1. But this has all of a sudden become a team that was had a lot of fantasy depth just a year or 2 back, and now they'll probably be one of the least drafted teams from a fantasy perspective in 23-24, unless you guys disagree.
Well, if we go by the trend of how every week's been going right now, Jeff's going to tell you why you should draft every Arizona Cardinal. Is that right, Jeff?
Here comes the stat of the week. What do you got, Mish?
Let me tell you, Joe mentioned a great foursome with DeAndre Hopkins. A great foursome was the Beatles, Joe. Greg Dortch was never, ever part of a great foursome. Don't bring that up ever again, my friend. And if you want to bring up a great foursome or just a great receiver in general, you'd be better off with Rod Tidwell than you would with Rondale Moore if somebody gets that Jerry Maguire reference. So it's going to be a train wreck of a season. This has happened over the last 25 years for the Arizona Cardinals. It's been hysterical almost to watch because you can see this like a laundry cycle, like a wash, rinse, repeat of them doing okay, getting better, being, halfway decent for 3-4 years, doing great for 2 years, and then go back down to the basement. It's just been that way. And they might as well sign a QB, a guy like Warner and Carson Palmer, because it's the old guys over 35 who bring them to the promised land, not these guys who they bring in like Josh Rosen or Kyler Murray. In any case, it's going to be a hell of an awful season for the Arizona Cardinals from a fantasy perspective and from a record perspective. I guarantee it, Mike.
And I completely agree. And like I said, if you go by the trend, you were going to give them props. But, yeah, I think we're all kind of seeing the thing. Now, there is a couple of people that I don't mind. I think Zach Ertz is probably going to be a great grab for your tight end position this year. I think that if you grab James Conner as your running back 3, you're going to be in really good shape because I do feel like that guy can give you running back 2, even running back 1 volume and numbers. And, when you start looking at,
he's going to get the volume, that's for sure.
What's that?
He'll get the volume this year for sure if he's healthy.
Yeah, because somebody's going to have to. And, when you look at his backups and things like that, you got Keontae Ingram, who is – I think he's pretty good, but I don't think he's going to be like, like Chase Edmonds was, like where he came in there and he was really able to be that number 2 punch for Arizona. He was a really good compliment to James Conner anyways. I don't really see Keontae Ingram being able to do that. Trey McBride, another guy that I really like, but I just don't see him being able to get a whole lot of volume off of Zach Ertz. So, there's not a whole lot of depth to be had on this team if any of these guys drop. But if I am grabbing anybody on this team, it's going to be James Conner and Zach Ertz. And, I feel like if I can get Kyler Murray in a super flex, like in the 5th round, 6th round, where he belongs, which he probably is still going in the 2nd and 3rd round. I haven't looked at the ADPs quite yet. I haven't done any off-season drafts, which is weird. I haven't joined any dynasty leagues this off-season, which is crazy. So
it's funny. I won it's funny you say that, Mike, just because I randomly won a best ball ticket on DraftKings the other day through like an NBA contest. So I'm waiting for the I think just to keep this a little fantasy driven, because we will talk about DFS as we get through the season. I think that DraftKings did just open their best ball contests. So you can actually start the fantasy season here on May 29th from a DFS perspective and enter some of those best ball contests just to start to get an idea of, like you said, the ADP and the draft positioning and everything like that. So that is one exciting thing here on May 29th, NFL related. You can start best ball DFS drafts.
Heck yeah, that's awesome, man. I love doing some best ball drafts. I like doing best ball as a whole, just because you don't really got to do a whole lot of thinking. And I think that's actually probably 2 good best ball grabs right there, is James Conner and Zach Ertz. I think those are.
It's great draft prep in general too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
Well, you guys have anything?
Mikey, real quick, Mikey, on Connor, because you got me thinking on Connor, because I remember at the beginning, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Connor started off pretty quickly for them last year, before he got hurt. And then I remember thinking, typical James Conner, he got hurt, and now he's not gonna get it back for the rest of the year. But one thing I was encouraged to see with Connor is he missed some time. He missed pretty much the whole month of October, came back in November, and he did show he got back up to 15, 16 carries a week, was averaging 4.5, 5 yards per carry. And, even after his injury, he scored 6 touchdowns in the last 7 weeks of the season. So you're absolutely right. There is legit fantasy value with James Conner going into the season. There's no doubt about that.
There is, Joe. The thing was, they had the threats of the wide receiver before. If Hollywood Brown is your top guy, not to mention Kyler Murray can't stay healthy to save his life. So if you don't have him on the field for half the season, and you don't have to worry about his running game, who are you going to key in on? Kyler Murray played 11 games last year. He averaged, in the games that he did play, he averaged 18 fantasy points per game, which is right around where Justin Herbert was, and I bagged on him last week as being much lower than a Patrick Mahomes, who just doesn't get the accolades that maybe he should, because people a lot of times will pick Kyler Murray. What we've seen the last couple of years, they'll pick Kyler Murray in a draft ahead of Patrick Mahomes sometimes, even though historically, because of the rushing factor, yet Mahomes just seems to put up way better numbers, and regardless of who you have on the same team. So it's interesting to see how this is going to play out this year, that the health of Murray, and then, kind of the dominoes fall from there, really. So
does anybody remember, was Colt McCoy their backup last year?
Yes.
Okay, so they feel good about Colt McCoy, obviously, because they didn't go and sign a different backup for this year. And just real quick, just in case anybody's wondering who Arizona's third string quarterback is right now, and this is a great professional sports name in general. Never heard of this guy. Clayton Tune from Houston, a rookie, is the third string quarterback right now on the Arizona Cardinal depth chart.
Yeah, that's actually somebody else that they had drafted.
5th round.
Yep, 5th round, as a matter of fact. Yeah, they got themselves a 5th round quarterback.
Wait. Wasn't Clayton Tune? Wasn't he employed by Brazzers last year with a name like that?
That's
I don't know. Just maybe that's just me. Sorry. Go ahead.
He was Brazzers famous, if I remember right.
That's right. He's up there, kid. He's up there.
Well, I'll tell you, the most relevant thing about the Arizona Cardinal 2023 fantasy season is going to be the defense that you play when they're playing the Arizona Cardinals, especially in that division. I can already see myself feeling very juicy for the 4 weeks that I'll get to start the Ram and 49er defense against these guys.
And I don't mean to interrupt again, but they now Google and a bunch of those other websites have Kyler Murray listed at 5'10", 208 pounds or something like that. If Kyler Murray is 5'10" and weighs more than me, then Joe is 6'4". Okay, that just ain't a thing. Period. So I guarantee he's not going to stay healthy. Don't waste a high draft pick on him. Even if, Mike mentioned 5th, 6th round, I wouldn't even bother at that point, to be honest with you, if he's not going to stay healthy, which just doesn't seem like, with his size and mobility and lack of weapons, I don't think it's worth it at this point.
Right.
Fantasy Pros has him at about 128 overall and 20th for quarterback in a standard league.
Okay. There you go.
That sounds about right.
Oh. Mike's out. He got so upset about the Kyler Murray stats. He said, "I'm out, dude. Let's shut this down." So
it's really interesting if you think about Murray fantasy wise, and it's funny, we got to keep going because I can't shut this thing down if I wanted to without Mikey. But where you said so 18 points a game last year. He is going to get you some rushing, and that is relevant, and that'll make up for some of the lack of passing. But I just wonder, if you're in a 10-team league, Kyler Murray can no longer be your starter week 1. I mean, he will be for some people. People are going to take
Right.
him. There's people who have that draft strategy where they just don't take a quarterback early no matter what. And Murray will be a great guy for people like that. But my problem with Murray is even if he rushes for 40, 50, 60 yards a game, he ain't going to throw any touchdowns. And he doesn't rush for a lot of touchdowns either. James Conner is actually pretty good in the red zone as far as that goes. So it's really hard to sell me on the value there. Versus some, even a Daniel Jones, who obviously isn't going to do it with his arm, but he became so consistent with his legs. I think I'd rather have Daniel Jones than Kyler Murray going into next year, which is kind of a funny thing to say.
Who would have mentioned that as of last year? Because I certainly would have thought that, but I completely agree now. And really, the only potentially dangerous guy from a fantasy standpoint is James Conner, only because he's going to get those red zone carries. He's going to be the guy punching for the few amount of touchdowns that they get.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting this coming year. And we chatted about him this week just because of the release of DeAndre Hopkins, which I simply don't get, by the way.
And they take a $22 million cap hit on that.
Are they really? I mean, when you look at the rest of their roster, I mean, it can't be a salary cap issue. Why would you drop Hopkins?
I don't really get it.
He's as good as he was before, in my opinion. I don't know what you think, Joe.
Absolutely. But I mean, so let's think about this though. He missed the first 4 to 6 games last year because of the performance enhanced PEDs or whatnot. So I don't know. Maybe some of these teams sometimes once that happens, these guys just don't leave the doghouse. I don't know if that's part of it. I know that it's already rumored that the Chiefs and Buffalo are like the 2 most serious teams about him right now, which kind of led me to my next point. Like, we're talking about Kyler Murray and Arizona not being as good this year as they've been the past few years. Obviously not last year, but they were 10-0 2 years ago going, halfway through the season.
Right.
But it's just making me think about the lack of parity right now in the NFL between the AFC and the NFC, and it's growing by the day. The AFC is getting stronger by the freaking week, and the NFC is just getting worse and worse. And now you're putting Aaron Rodgers on the Jets. You're taking DeAndre Hopkins and potentially putting him on one of the better AFC teams already. You're putting Jimmy Garoppolo on the Raiders. It's just the AFC is just going to destroy. To me, I don't know what the line would be if you could bet on the AFC winning the Super Bowl this year, but I'd put everything I have on that right now.
It is interesting, and it's almost like the depending on where he goes. I mean, the rich get richer if he ends up on the Chiefs or the Bills. So if we're going PPR over the last 10 seasons with Hopkins, right? This is his average points per game over the last 10 years. So 8.9, 14.4, 20.7, 12.3, 20.7, 20.8, 17.9, 18, 14.7, and 16.9. The guy has not slowed down. He's beyond consistent.
And he had no quarterback in a lot of those years in Houston too.
That's true. And even I think it was J.J. Watt put out a tweet either today or yesterday, said he still has the best hands of any receiver in the game, according to him. And I'll take J.J.'s Watt opinion over a lot of people's. So it's going to be interesting to see how where he ends up and then kind of how the season shakes out for everybody.
It's funny too because I loved them at the beginning of the year. Like Hollywood Brown is the number 2 with Hopkins there. I absolutely loved it. And the first few weeks last year, you didn't have Hopkins because he was hurt. But again, talking about Brown, he was making a lot of plays for them. But I just don't see when you get the number 1 quarterback on Brown, it's just he proved it in Baltimore. He can't do it. That plus the fact that he's going to drop a couple balls a game. But
in the NFL in 2023, if you don't have 2 great wide receivers, then you don't have an offense, period.
Yeah.
Because we look at the offenses around the league now. I mean, obviously you mentioned in the AFC especially, but you got the Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and so on and so forth. You got to have these 2 guys.
Teams are going with 3 now. Seattle drafts, and I don't even remember, but Seattle drafts first round wideout to go with freaking Metcalf and Lockett.
Right.
And then Minnesota just drafted a first round wideout to go with Justin Jefferson and well, now KJ Osborne. They let Thielen walk, I believe. Oh,
Right.
Did Thielen walk, or is Thielen still there? Did he go to Miami?
I can't confirm that one, brother. We'll have to actually take some comments from anybody who's watching this one down in the comment section on YouTube.
Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers he went to.
Oh, yeah, that's a solid team.
But anyways, we're drifting. I think that unless you got something to add, Mish, Arizona's become one of those teams where they will not have a lot of fantasy ownership. I predict the most relevant piece of their fantasy season will be playing the defenses that play Arizona throughout the season. Those two matchups, again, with the 49ers are already looking juicy to me. Maybe James Conner's your number 2 RB and you can survive with that. But I think it's the beginning of the end for Kyler Murray.
The moral of the story is you can do a hell of a lot better than anybody who's on the Arizona Cardinals this upcoming season. Join us next week. I think we might be getting into the Raiders. Who knows what we're going back on track. We'll get back into the Raiders. Tom Brady's a new part owner over there, so it should be interesting to discuss.
What about that Jimmy Garoppolo thing all of a sudden now? He's got a foot injury. There's a waiver in the contract.
We have plenty to get into. We look forward to that. Thanks for joining us this week. Mike froze out a little bit here at the end here. We'll get him back on track next week and appreciate you guys checking in.
Like sands of the hourglass, these are the days of waiting for the NFL season to start.
Here we go, baby.
Let's go, Mikey. I don't know if he can bring us home. Let's check a text here. What do we got? Can he bring us home? All right. This is it. Next week, or no, Wednesday night, we'll do the Raiders.
We'll check in, ladies and gentlemen.
Go Celtics.
Appreciate the patience at the end of the show here. Joe and I have zero control over this. So go Celtics.
This is exactly how not to end a show. Thank you. Good night.